All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. So, the regular season of this college football campaign is officially in the books, and the only thing that stands between us and the college football playoff right now is conference championship weekend. So, what do we know so far? Of the power conferences, the Big Ten is definitely getting three teams, while the SEC is more than likely to get five. The Big 12 definitely has one team in the form of Texas Tech, and maybe BYU will join them if they're able to win their league title this Saturday. And then there's the ACC, where we know that their conference champion is going to get into the playoff, but will they get another participant? So I'm saying that because if they were to get another participant, it would be a Miami who finished the regular season with a record of 10-2, while they're currently ranked 12th in the most recent playoff poll. However, we all know the Hurricanes won't be in the ACC championship game this Saturday night, as they were a part of a five-way tie for second place in the league with the 7-5 Duke Blue Devils getting the nod to take on Virginia. Now, Miami more than likely, and I really can go to the bank on this one, they're not going to make the playoff. In spite of the fact that they have the same record as Notre Dame, and the Hurricanes defeated the Fighting Irish to begin this season. So you look at that and say, well, why is that not the case? Well, what has helped Notre Dame, in spite of them losing their first two games of the season, is the Irish never dropped out of the top 25 of the AP poll. Okay. And following their loss to Texas A&M in their home opener, which is right on the heels of them losing to Miami, Notre Dame has since steamrolled everybody who they've played. So at the end of the day, the AP poll likes Notre Dame. Okay, and the college football playoff committee is the same, as they've had the Fighting Irish ranked ahead of Miami throughout this process. The CFP has, and right now, of course, the Fighting Irish are ranked two spots ahead of the Canes. So if you're Miami, you got to be pissed off right now. Okay, and you have every right to be, because guess what? You finished with the same record as Notre Dame, and you beat them in the head to head. I don't care if it was week 1 or week 10. Fighting Irish are trying to figure it out. I don't care. The bottom line is Miami won the game. Okay. Now, aside from Notre Dame, Miami's best wins this season were against South Florida, a team that was in the mix to win the American, and of course, they're not going to the conference championship game. And then Pitt, Pitt's a part of that 6-2 jumble, and of course, Pitt had an opportunity to handle their business and get to Charlotte for the title game, and of course, they didn't. But nonetheless, on the flip side for Notre Dame, they beat Boise, a Boise State team that is playing for the Mountain West Championship this weekend. They beat USC by 10 points. USC team that went 7-2 in the Big Ten Conference. They also beat Navy, a Navy team that went 7-1 in the American, and they tied with Tulane and North Texas for the top spot in that league. And they also beat Pitt. But for me, it still comes back to the head to head, as both of these teams are going to finish tied with the same record. Like I said before, okay, this is why I felt the ACC should have simply said, you know what, screw the formula that we agreed to, and just have our two highest ranked teams meet for the conference championship. Because of course, if that was the case, you'd have a ranked Miami taking on a ranked Virginia. But nonetheless, the ACC more than likely would have still probably gotten one more bid, only one bid rather, for the playoff. But it would have been more than likely that there would have been little doubt left behind at that point, because your two best teams, and I still feel that Miami should be there. That's my personal opinion. But nonetheless, your two best teams should be playing for the conference title. So the bottom line is, this year at least, to me, I think the committee really doesn't like the ACC. We saw them get two teams in last year, and that was because of the upset that Clemson had against SMU in the ACC championship game. Both of them got in. And I'm saying this right now for this year, that I feel like, and again, this is from an outsider's perspective, that the committee doesn't like the overall strength of the ACC in comparison to other leagues. So, you hear folks about the college football playoff, this, that, and third. Okay, they want to go with more of a pro style model. I totally get it. But if this were the NFL, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now. Why? Because the head to head scenario is always the first tiebreaker. And you can talk about strength of schedule. You can talk about how teams are playing now, this, that, and the third. Any way you want to slice it. But the bottom line is this: Miami beat Notre Dame this year. You cannot get around that. Make no mistake about it, this is not going to be the first time that college football has had an issue, whether it came to crowning a national champion, the BCS, the 14 playoff, and now the 12-team playoff. I mean, one that always sticks out for me. Okay, you go back to 1993. We had an undefeated Florida State take on an undefeated Notre Dame that year. Notre Dame was number two. Florida State was number one. Notre Dame beat Florida State. The following week, Notre Dame was upset at the hands of Boston College. However, both of these teams finished with the same record that year, but Florida State was awarded the national championship. I just feel like this: as much as college football looks to expand and looks to change things, certain things they just cannot get out of their own way against, because, again, the ultimate tiebreaker, regardless of the sport, is always the head to head. And of course, people are going to say, well, you know what? This is just another example of why the CFP should be expanded, because if we had a 14 or 16 or even a 2014 college football playoff, we're not having this discussion about Miami. Okay, guess what? You wouldn't be having the discussion about Miami, but I guarantee you there's going to be another team that you'd be having that discussion about. Why? Because it doesn't matter. 2 team, 14, 18, 16 team, whatever. How big the tournament is, there's always going to be a team that feels slighted, and they're going to say, we should have gotten in. When we had a 64 team NCAA tournament, there was always a 65 team that beef. When they expanded to 65 teams, there was always a 66 team that beef. We're at 68 teams right now. There's always a 69 team that says, you know what, hey, we should be in this field. Like I've said before, and I will continue to say, 12 teams is enough. That's the bottom line. It's just up to the committee to get the right 12 teams into the postseason tournament. So, again, like I said, does Miami have a shot at making the playoff this year? And at this point, I mean, it would have to be an ultimate miracle, in my opinion, for the Canes to try to pull this off. You'd have to have a scenario where Alabama, and I'm just throwing this out there as a possibility. What if Alabama completely got embarrassed by Georgia in the SEC championship game? I say this because the Crimson Tide are currently ninth. And what would happen if BYU were to beat Texas Tech? Because, again, Texas Tech is currently ranked fourth. And if Texas Tech were to lose in the Big 12 title game to BYU, I don't see the committee knocking them out of the top 12, especially after the season that the Red Raiders have had. And the reason why I bring that up is Miami is they're idle this weekend. So it's not going to be a scenario where you're going to put them into the field over a BYU who's competing in the Big 12 championship game. I'm just throwing these scenarios out there, but nonetheless, it is very unlikely that you're going to see Miami in the college football playoff. And I think the way that things came down with the current rankings and the way that the CFP would look like right now, if it were today, it's all but done. Because, like I said last night, you've got Ohio State and Indiana 1-2, and they're about to face off in the Big Ten championship game. So what's going to happen there? Clearly, the winner of that game is going to be the first overall seed in this tournament. You've got the 3 seed Georgia taking on the 9th seed Alabama for the SEC championship game. I think if Georgia beats Alabama in the SEC championship game, they move up to number 2. Okay, what if Alabama beats Georgia? And of course, you're talking about an 11-2 SEC championship champion, excuse me, who would have then have defeated Georgia twice this year. You definitely got to move the Crimson Tide up, and I think even in spite of the fact that they're number 9, Alabama would definitely get a first round bye because of the fact that they won the SEC. On top of that, how far would the loser of the Big Ten championship game drop? Would they still get a first round bye? We got to wait and see that scenario right there. Texas Tech, of course, if they win out, if they beat BYU, maybe they move up to that 3 line. You never know. Oregon, I think, is sitting pretty at number 5, as is Ole Miss at number 6. Of course, both of these teams are not contending for their respective conference championships. Same thing with Texas A&M at 7. Same thing with Oklahoma at 8. Again, typically the committee has said they're not going to hold it against teams if they lose their conference championship game, if they're already comfortably in the field. So again, I think barring something unforeseen, Alabama at number 9 is going to be there. Notre Dame, like I said, the committee likes Notre Dame. That's why they're there. And then, of course, conference champion number 4 as the 11th seed and conference champion number 5 as the 12th seed. So again, it ain't looking like that the Hurricanes are going to be a part of this party. At the end of the day, if you're Miami, you've got to be frustrated because you're going to look at it and say, "Hey, what's the purpose of the head-to-head?" Okay, I totally get it right there. And again, for the most part, people are going to say, "Well, Miami should have gone out there and not lost to SMU, not lost to Louisville." Listen, SMU was a part of that 5-way tie. SMU got to the ACC championship game last year, and they had an opportunity to get back there this year. So, and Miami went on the road and lost that game. So it's not like they're going out there and losing to a bad team. Louisville was playing some good football at the time of when they went to South Florida and knocked off the Canes. But of course, the second half of the season was not didn't work out that way. The only thing I can say for Miami at this point, it has a sting, it has the hurt, but you got to come back and strive to be even better than you were this season. It's going to be a lot of frustration. It's going to um, have some angst with it, but I think at the end of the day, the CFP is never going to be without controversy. There's always going to be controversy each and every year. And I think what we're seeing right now with Notre Dame and Miami is going to be this year's edition of that controversy. Um, the best thing for Mario Cristobal and company at this point, you know what? They're going to get a bowl game. Just try to make sure his guys are up for that game and they go out there and are ready to play. Because, like I said, it is highly unlikely that the Canes are going to jump a couple of teams to get into the postseason. But nonetheless, like I said before, it's all about controversy. And this year, CFP has it. Miami more than likely is going to be sitting home while Notre Dame is moving on. Smith 4201, how are you? And happy Wednesday evening to you. You're saying right now, I'm just hoping OU locks up that home playoff game. I'll tell you like this, man. Oklahoma as that 8 seed, I think they get that home game. You look at the Sooners. It was a much better year for them this time around in the Southeastern Conference. I think Brent Venables did a solid job with this team this year. They went 10-2 overall. They went 6-2 in the SEC, and of course, I've said this before, and I will say it again. I give him all of the credit in the world because back-to-back road wins at Tennessee at night, and then against Alabama, especially the way that Alabama was playing at the time. You know what? That has to account for something. And again, right there, you look at it with the head-to-head. Alabama, they're 10-2. Oklahoma's 10-2. But guess what? In spite of the fact that Alabama has a better conference record than the Sooners are ahead of the Crimson Tide because why? Oklahoma beat them in the head-to-head, and they did it on the road. Okay, so again, these head-to-heads have to account for something. But I'll tell you like this: the folks in Norman, um, clearly we know Oklahoma's a blue blood. They're going to be happy to get into the playoffs. Of course, Oklahoma's been there multiple times. First time, this would be the first time since without Bob Stoops or Lincoln Riley. But nonetheless, be the first time that Oklahoma is hosting a postseason game. We're accustomed to seeing the Sooners travel around the country for these games. So nonetheless, uh, the folks in Norman are going to be ready to go for that game. And to your point, I do think Oklahoma gets the opportunity to host a first round game. You're saying I know chances are small for them to win all the way, but if we can beat Alabama again in the SEC, I will be extremely happy with how they did with what they had. I'll tell you like this, from the nostalgic aspect, you remember Ohio State was an 8 seed last year before they went all the way. I'm not saying it can happen this year if Oklahoma's an 8 seed, but the bottom line is you got to be in it to win it, and Oklahoma is in it. Anything can happen. And remember, um, after the first round, all of these games are on neutral sites. So if you're the Sooners, you got to say, hey, let's go out there and take care of our business. And then if you're the Sooners and you get the Crimson Tide possibly in round number one, got to do what's not easy to do in sports, which is defeat a team twice this year. And we're going to see if that works out here in conference championship weekend. Because again, going to the Big 12, we saw BYU and Texas Tech face off. We saw Georgia and Alabama face off already in the SEC. And I said this before, with the expanded 12-team playoff, there's going to be a possibility. It hasn't happened so far yet, but we could see the possibility of two conference opponents playing each other 3 times. It's basically the equivalent of what we've seen, in the NCAA tournament, where we sometimes have seen conference foes face off 4 times, twice in the regular season, once in the conference tournament, and then also in the Big Dance in the NCAA's. So nonetheless, let's see what happens for Oklahoma. But with the Canes, I think they're going to be left out in the dark. Some people are going to say again, Notre Dame should go to a conference. The ACC should make Notre Dame join the conference full time, because this isn't right. But like I said before last year, when Notre Dame got to the championship game, unlike the other teams that were in that CFP, they didn't have a conference affiliation. So with that said, they didn't have to share that bread. Okay, and I think because of that, and with how far that Notre Dame got and the money that they accumulated, I think that to seal the fate that we're never going to see the Irish in a conference. You're saying who's my pick to go all the way? I'll tell you right now, on this date at least. I still want to see how the brackets play out, but as of right now, if I had to pick a team, I would say Ohio State. They have looked the part all season long, and they've simply run roughshod over everybody that they played. In spite of the fact that Texas is going to be on the outside looking in of this, Texas is a good football team. Ohio State made them look ordinary to begin the season. You think about what we just saw the Buckeyes do on the road in Ann Arbor to Michigan, a Michigan team with a very good defense, folks. And Ohio State went out there and punched them in the mouth. Okay, so I'm looking at things, and like I said, if I had to be a betting man, I'd have to roll with Ohio State. But nonetheless, I think that is going to be a phenomenal Big Ten championship game this Saturday night between the Buckeyes and the Hoosiers. Okay, and I think we are in store for a great conference championship weekend overall. And I'm actually going to talk about it tomorrow night when I give my grand game previews of those contests. So definitely chime into that. But I'm looking forward to that American contest because I feel like at this point, whoever wins the American, whether it's Tulane or North Texas, they're getting the Group of Five's bid for the CFP. I mean, you look at Tulane right now; they're ranked. North Texas is also 11-1, so I think that game is going to have a lot of bearing. Definitely the SEC championship game, the Big 12 championship game, I think is going to be a dandy. The Big 10 championship game is going to be solid. Virginia better watch out in that ACC championship game with Duke. Why? Because if you're Duke, you're playing with house money right now. And like I said last night in my short when the CFP rankings were announced, let's say that Duke wins the ACC. They'd be 8-5. Let's say if Tulane wins the American, okay, and they get the CFP bid, they would be 11-2. Pardon me, the Group of Five bid for the CFP. They'd be 11-2. But remember, Tulane beat Duke this year. So that means would the committee put the Group of Five representative, if it was a Tulane, in front of an ACC champion Duke, hypothetically speaking? Something that we have to pay attention to. But nonetheless, I think we are in store for some good old fashioned football. And if anybody is a fan of college football, I know I am, and I know everybody else is chiming in on this. I'm definitely going to be checking it out. Um, I don't know about y'all. I really can't say I have a game that I'm looking forward to more than others, because I think that SEC championship game is going to be a dandy. The same thing with the Big Ten championship game. And this is the time of the year for it, folks. And like I said, if your favorite team isn't in it, doesn't mean you can't not go out there and check it out. And at the same time, like I said, getting back to the base of this, if you're Miami, you got to be frustrated. But again, like I said, maybe this paves the way for the ACC going forward to change how they do things. And like I said before, they should push the two highest ranked teams or the highest ranked teams to break a tiebreaker in the CFP rankings to get to the conference championship game. You go back to the first CFP, and when Ohio State leapfrogged both Baylor and TCU, because that year there was no Big 12 championship game. And also in that year, the Big 12 did not want to go out there and name a conference champion. And of course, Ohio State got hot down the stretch. They blew out Wisconsin in the Big Ten championship game. And before you blink, the Buckeyes leapfrogged both Baylor and TCU, got into the CFP. Cardale Jones was a man among boys in that tournament throwing the football, as was Maurice Clarett. Pardon me, I said Maurice Clarett. Ezekiel Elliott, thinking about another great Ohio State running back, but nonetheless, they were a two-man wrecking crew, and of course, the rest is history. Matt Cawthorn, 1755. How are you doing? Happy Wednesday evening to you. You're saying in 1993, the Irish beat FSU early and lost to Boston late finish. Yeah, I think that game, I think it was like a week or so apart, maybe 2 weeks, when Notre Dame knocked off FSU, because I know it was late in the season. It wasn't the end. And it was like maybe like a week or so after that was when the Eagles went to South Bend and knocked off Notre Dame. We've seen it a lot. I mean, you go back to 1996 when Florida got the national championship, and they went. I want to say it was 12-1 that year, because in those days teams were playing 11 games in the regular season, and of course conference championship games as well. Nonetheless, late in that year, Florida lost to Florida State, came back and won the SEC championship, knocked off Alabama. And of course, those days in the Bowl Alliance, the Big Ten and the Pac-10 were tied in to the Rose Bowl. And we saw Ohio State lose their last game of the season to Michigan, because in those days, John Cooper's Buckeyes always struggled against Michigan. And then, of course, Arizona State went into the Rose Bowl undefeated. We saw Ohio State knock off Arizona State. I think Florida might have been ranked third or fourth heading into the Sugar Bowl with Florida State for the rematch. And of course, the Seminoles were number one, and Florida State got destroyed by Florida. And I think that year we had five teams finish with one loss. It was Florida, Florida State, BYU, because that was Steve Sarkisian was a quarterback, and I think the Cougars that year went like 13-1 or 14-1. They played in an extensive amount of games for that time. Okay, and then you had ASU, who had one loss, as did Ohio State. But of course, it was given to Florida that year. There was a lot of controversy behind that, of course. In those days, no playoff. But between that, 93, with Notre Dame and Florida State, and then, of course, another year sandwiched in between there was 94, when both Nebraska and Penn State finished undefeated. And, of course, Nebraska was crowned as national champions. And then what about 97, when both Michigan and Nebraska were undefeated? And, of course, I think it was the AP that gave it to Nebraska, and then the coaches gave it to Michigan, so there was co-champions. Nonetheless, you would think with the postseason tournament, right, the way it is right now, that we would have eliminated a lot of this controversy. But like I said, the controversy is always going to be there. I don't care how much you expand this thing. You're saying, oh, you shouldn't even be in the playoffs. They're unbelievably bad. Well, I mean, listen, it's one of those again. You're 10-2. You went 10-2 in the SEC, 6-2 overall in that league. Oklahoma's 2 losses, Texas, and of course Ole Miss. But like I said, going on the road and knocking off Tennessee, going on the road and knocking off Alabama in consecutive weeks, that definitely has to account for something. And I think, listen, Oklahoma at this point, in my opinion, has earned their spot in this tournament. And I definitely think the Sooners will get there. And of course, like I said at the start, I don't think that Miami's going to be there as well. But then, of course, like I said, there's always going to be people complaining. The inclusion of the group of five, I'm all for it. Notre Dame's inclusion, I'm all for that as well. And like I said, but I've said this before countless times, and I'll say it again. These are all things that people have agreed upon. How can you justify Miami being over the ACC champs if Virginia wins? Miami at this point, like I said, they're not going to get there. If their thing, what they needed was to get to the ACC championship game. Clearly, we know if it's Duke or Virginia, they're getting a nod. Whoever loses that game, they're not getting in. I think the rankings prove that at this point. So, like I said before, best case scenario for Miami to have somewhat of a slim chance would be, well, you know what? You would need a BYU first and foremost to beat a Texas Tech. And the reason why I say that is if Miami had a chance, they're not going to just leapfrog all of those teams. It would take multiple situations. You need a BYU knocking off a Texas Tech in the Big 12 championship game. And then also, Alabama would probably have to get destroyed in the SEC championship game. But again, how much would the committee hold that against them, even if they were to lose to Georgia in the SEC championship game? Because remember, Alabama beat Georgia this year already in Athens, and they also went 7-1 within the SEC. So again, it's a long shot at best, okay, for Miami to get in at this point. That's just the way it is. The ACC is going to get one. The Big 12 definitely one. The Big 10 three. You got Oregon, you've got Indiana, and of course you've got Ohio State. And it's looking like the SEC is going to get five, and then of course Notre Dame's back in it, and then of course your Group of Five representative. And when it's all said and done, that's going to be the 12. Uh, BYU can get in if they beat Texas Tech this week. Yeah, definitely. Because I mean, the Big 12 champ is going to get in, and then you would talk about a BYU team being 12-1 at that point. They would absolutely be in. And again, I think regardless at this point, Texas Tech is in. The Red Raiders, they're seeded fourth, and you like this for the sake of argument. Let's say Texas Tech loses to BYU Saturday. You're not going to take a team from number four and then put them on the outside of this tournament. If we're talking about a Texas Tech maybe being 10th or 11th seeded at that point, different story. But you're not going to drop from four all the way out of things. So I think the Red Raiders are firmly in it. I think anybody 1 through 8 is firmly in there. And like I said, Alabama at number 9. What for me, it would have to be if they got blown out by Georgia for it to be in consideration. I think that's going to be a phenomenal game, so I don't see that happening. You're saying extremely confused on how Ole Miss passes up Texas A&M. Sure, they have a better resume, but they lost their head coach. Oh my, yeah. Listen, I feel for the folks in Oxford right now. Also, not much momentum heading into the playoffs for Ole Miss. I'll tell you like this: Ole Miss's body of work definitely helps them. And then also, I think what helps them is going on the road and knocking off in Oklahoma. Another thing that helps Ole Miss is, yeah, Lane Kiffin is leaving or has left, okay? But they still have the bulk of their coaching staff, and we don't know what this Ole Miss team would look like without a Lane Kiffin. Let's say, just for the sake of argument, that Ole Miss got to the SEC championship game and they look terrible. Okay, that might change the mindset on some people about Ole Miss, but of course, that's not the case. I compare it to a couple of years ago where Florida State went undefeated and did not make the last 14 college football playoff as Alabama got in front of them, and it was because, hey, you know what? We saw Florida State that year without their quarterback Jordan Travis, and they struggled to knock off Louisville, I believe it was, to win the ACC championship. So we had an idea, an inkling, if you will, what Florida State looked like. We don't know what Ole Miss is going to look like without Lane Kiffin. So I think they get the benefit of the doubt at number 6. I was surprised, honestly, to your point, that Texas A&M did drop as far as they did from 3 to 7. Going to Austin on a Friday night in a rivalry game to play Texas is not an easy thing. Remember, Texas A&M lost their quarterback Marcel Reed for a small portion of that game. He did come back, but again, the Aggies did go 11-0 up until that point. So clearly, they're not going to get a first round bye anymore. They're not going to be a conference champion. We know that, but I still think Mike Elko is going to have a very dangerous team in the postseason. And of course, the way that things are looking right now, if the CFP started today, it would be A&M hosting Notre Dame. Another possible rematch because, again, remember, these two teams met early in the campaign. You saying they still have their players and coordinators. They might even be more fired up. I'll tell you like this. Um, I think there's going to be a lot of people around the country, cheering or rooting for Ole Miss. A, because of what happened, and B, who did it. Because A, Lane Kiffin is not the most popular man in Oxford right now, and B, a lot of people see Lane Kiffin as a snake oil salesman. So you know what? I think Ole Miss has become a lot of sweethearts for a lot of people. So people are definitely going to be cheering for them. And to your point, they're definitely going to go out there with a chip on their shoulder. It's going to be an us against the world philosophy, and you never know. Lane Kiffin's departure might have rallied this team together more than they already were. So we got to see how that works out. Hypothetical matchup between A&M and Notre Dame. Wow. Like I said before, it's always difficult to beat a team twice in a season. But remember, this Notre Dame squad, still a lot of the guys on that team from the year before, they went to College Station to begin the 2024 season and knock off Texas A&M. So I'll tell you like this: the way that Notre Dame is playing right now, and I think they have a team that could go to College Station and win that game. I think it would be very, very intriguing. The way things are right now, I'm looking forward to that Alabama Oklahoma matchup potentially, but I think that's going to change regardless of whether or not Alabama wins or loses. I think that matchup changes, especially if it wins. You're not going to see the Crimson Tide in that slot there. Okay, Ole Miss at home, I think they're going to be fired up. An A&M Notre Dame matchup would be very interesting, and I think whoever it is, whether it's the American Conference champion or the ACC champion there at that 12 slot to potentially face an Oregon. Um, I think if it's a Virginia Oregon matchup, for an example, or a Duke Oregon matchup, for an example, I think Oregon's really going to like pin their ears back. American wise, probably the same thing. I mean, the Ducks are a team. The Ducks are very dangerous. It's just the fact that they had probably one bad half of football at home this year against Indiana, a darn good Indiana team, an Indiana team who has the potential to be the number one overall seed in this tournament. So again, there's a lot of intrigue, and I think there's a lot of excitement for potential matchups coming down in this tournament. You're saying, speaking of Kiffin, do you think a rule should be made about departing a team before the team season officially ends? I know it's business, but yeah. Oh, listen, I mean, there should be a lot of rules in place, but the problem is, and like I've said before, you have the NCAA in place, but they really don't do anything because if the NCAA was all about rules and what's right or what's wrong, we wouldn't have coast to coast conferences right now. We darn sure wouldn't have USC, Oregon, and others in the Big Ten. You wouldn't have Stanford and Cal talking about their plan in the ACC. We can go right down the list. So absolutely, there needs to be changes done as far as this coaching carousel. Listen, you see it in basketball sometimes where coaches have a successful season and they move to a different job. I totally get it, but at least have some decorum about it. I know that LSU wanted to and needed to fill their coaching chair. Okay. So it's one of those where they wanted to make sure that they went out there and got their guy. But if this was the NFL, you definitely wouldn't do this because you have windows when you can talk to coaches and you can't talk to coaches. And I think it's been a huge distraction for Ole Miss. Credit to their players for keeping the white noise outside and focusing on the job at hand. And they've gotten this far. But I think here now it's not a scenario like it was years before where we're just talking about teams going to a bowl game. Okay, this is a chance to be national champions, and there's levels and layers to it. And now Ole Miss doesn't have their main guy, and I thought it was a bad look for Lane Kiffin to talk about let me stay on because this is not like you're at a James Madison where if you have a successful season, the coach is expected to leave. Okay, we get that. And it's not like, okay, we're just playing in a random bowl game and we could go on to focus. No, your head coach is talking to another team, a team within your league, a rival team within your league, and then basically try to hold it over the entire school. Well, you know what? I'm trying to take these guys with me. And of course, not too many guys got on that plane from Oxford to Baton Rouge with him last Sunday. So I think that tells you where their loyalty is. But nonetheless, it was wrong. Okay. And the whole way that it went down was wrong. And it would be the funniest thing in the world. I know it's not going to happen right away, but we've got Penn State still out there looking for a head coach. Apparently, there's rumors, and only rumors, I don't know if it's true, about them possibly having Kalen DeBoer from Alabama on their radar. What if Kalen DeBoer were, hypothetically speaking, were to leave and go to Penn State? Lane Kiffin really wants that Alabama job. That would be hilarious right now. I'm just throwing it out there. But yeah, man. Listen, definitely appreciate the comments. Definitely appreciate the sub, man. Definitely appreciate this, man. But with Lane Kiffin, man, like I said, he's a snake oil salesman, man. You figure when Al Davis showed him the door after a little bit over a year with the Raiders, people thought Al Davis was senile. Al Davis knew what he was talking about. You remember Nick Saban got rid of him during Alabama's postseason run. I remember at the SEC championship game that year, Nick Saban left him there, okay, because Saban was ticked off with Lane Kiffin. I remember when he was the coach at SC. I think Pat Hayden was still the AD at the time. Pat Hayden went out there after they got blown out in Tempe by Arizona State. Pat Hayden met them at the tarmac, met USC at the tarmac at LAX and fired Lane Kiffin there. And like I said the other night, after this news broke about Lane Kiffin going to Ole Miss, for all of those folks that are happy that he's in Baton Rouge, do not for 1 minute think that if an Alabama job or something else opens up, Lane Kiffin won't do the same thing to LSU that he currently did to Ole Miss. So that's it, man. You're saying I feel like the ACC making my attacks at Notre Dame is the dumbest thing ever. Their conference might not have a single team in. They should be going after teams like Ole Miss, Oklahoma, and Alabama. Well, to your point, that's one thing that the Big Ten and SEC have been talking about since they basically control the roost for this college football playoff going forward. And what they're looking at in expanding it is more guaranteed spots for each league. And of course, the SEC and the Big Ten would have more slots compared to the ACC and the Big 12. It's all about the quote unquote pecking order. But nonetheless, it's one of those for me where I'm not a fan of that aspect because I feel like it should all be about merit if you are a good team or not. I will say this though, of the four power conferences, I'm totally on board with the conference champion getting an automatic bid. It gives that vibe, like the NCAA tournament for basketball. I'm totally for that. At this point of the year, we can see who the contenders are around the country, regardless of what league that they're in. I'm still in favor of the 12-team playoff because I feel like if you expand it, you water it down. But I think the way it is, it puts so much focus on the entire season, and I think more than ever, it's tougher to win. Even though you still like there are teams that win and they deserve all the credit that they get for winning because of the parity in college football. And a lot of things have changed with the NILs, the transfer portal, and of course with these bigger conferences, everybody doesn't play everybody. But nonetheless, you've got to be on point each and every time you take the field. Miami looked like world beaters at the beginning of the season, and I remember watching that game when they lost to Louisville. It was a Friday night game at home. Mario Cristobal's team was not ready to play, whereas Jeff Brom's squad was. I said going into the SMU game that was going to be a problem for Miami because I felt like nationally SMU was not getting respected. Going to Dallas and having to face that team was not going to be an easy task. And of course, we saw what happened to Miami. Nonetheless, the rest of the way, the Canes did take care of their business. You're saying, Myth, Tulane's coach might get picked up from the Gators. He already has. Okay. And honestly, I think it's a better move than the drama Kiffin brings along with the price tag. Well, with Florida, they wanted Lane Kiffin. They were in that sweepstakes. But, to their credit, they realized from about a week ago or so that, hey, we're not going to get this guy. They really should have had him a couple of years ago because when they fired Dan Mullen, reports are that Dan Mullen told Florida to go out there and get Lane Kiffin. And I think this is when Lane Kiffin was still at Florida Atlantic. I could be wrong at the time. But nonetheless, he told them on the way out the door, go get him. And they didn't. They went and got Billy Napier. And of course, it just didn't work out for them right there. But nonetheless, to Florida's credit, they did have a backup plan. Their plan B was John Summerall. That was their guy from Tulane. I'm not saying that he's going to have success in the SEC because the SEC, as far as coaching goes, is not for the faint at heart, and it's very easy to get lost in the shuffle there. But nonetheless, Florida is desperate to get back to being on the national scene. It's been so long, folks, since the Gators have been there. They have the money, they have the resources, and of course, we know the talent in the Sunshine State on the gridiron is top notch. But they've got to try to keep up with the Joneses and the SEC, which is easier said than done. Your Texases, your Florida, your Georgias, your LSUs, your Alabamas, your Tennessees. We can go right down the list. Like I said, almost basically more than any other league in college football. It is so easy to get lost in the shuffle in that league, especially if you don't have the right coach. So let's see if it works out for Summerall and the Gators. You're saying for Miami fans, what are the justifications for Notre Dame being in front of Miami? Listen, again, like I said, if this were the NFL, the first tiebreaker is the head-to-head. Miami beat Notre Dame. I don't care if it was week 1. I don't care if it was week 10. I don't care if you want to say, well, Notre Dame was trying to still get it figured out. First game of the season on the road, yada, yada, yada. The bottom line is that's why you play the game. Miami won. Notre Dame didn't. Uh, yeah, it is tough in the SEC, but Gators need something new. Oh, listen. Uh, Billy Napier, what saved him last year was that run in the second half of the season, beating Florida and Ole Miss at home, knocking off Florida State. It's always good to beat your rival. They came close to knocking off both Tennessee and Georgia last year, fell short. And then, of course, they won their bowl game. And the expectations changed this year, but I knew it was going to be tough for the Gators due to their schedule. And, of course, it showed. So Florida's got to try to find a way to get ahead of things in the SEC. It's doable. Don't get me wrong. Yes. But again, recruiting, the transfer portals, the NILs, everything, you've got to be on point. So let's see if the Gators can figure it out. Right now, you got multiple Florida teams trying to turn it back around because, again, Florida State, the expectations were high heading into this year. Didn't work out for them either. And I, for one, think that college football is in a better place when we're talking about Miami, Florida, and Florida State being ranked and contending for championships. So let's see if those schools can figure it out. Like I said, for Miami, more often than not, Canes, they're going to be bowling. They're going to go to a big time bowl game, but it just ain't going to be part of the New Year's Six. You're saying you think the biggest problem for the Gators was the injury to the quarterback and not getting reps in. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's going to be important for Summerall because the Gators have talent. They just need somebody to galvanize it and bring it all together. So he's got to have that retention with who he has because even though it didn't work out for Billy Napier at Florida, he could recruit. Okay, his issue at times was getting it done on Saturdays, and of course, recruiting is only part of it because you can recruit the guys. You still got to coach them up, and of course, as a head coach, you are judged by wins and losses, and of course, the big ones. And if you're at Florida, you got to beat Tennessee. You've got to beat Georgia. You've got to beat Florida State, and you've got to be contending for that SEC championship. Got to go back to 2008 to find the last time that the Gators won the SEC. They've gotten to the SEC championship game several times since then, but of course, each and every time they ran into Nick Saban in Alabama, and of course, the rest is history. But folks, that's going to wrap it up. And as always, I want to take this time out to thank each and every one of you for checking out this edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast. Hope you liked what you heard and saw on this edition. And as always, hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. Like I always say, it's greatly appreciated. And if you got some friends that like sports, tell them to check it out as well. Also, like I said before, tomorrow night, I'm going to be talking about my preview for this conference championship weekend. I'm going to be talking about each and every game, and that includes the Sun Belt Conference Championship game, Conference USA's championship game, the Mountain West, the MAC, and of course the big boys, ACC, Big 10, Big 12, SEC. I'm not going to leave anything to doubt. So if you are a college football fan, and if you are looking forward to this weekend, you'll definitely check that out tomorrow night. Myth, definitely thanks for chiming in. I appreciate the support on this one, my man. Like I said, don't be a stranger. Okay, definitely come back and check things out. Um, and for everybody else who dropped in on this comment on this chat box, I definitely appreciate the love as well. Also, if you were on the X, formerly known as Twitter, you can check me out anytime at 300 Pounds of Sports. And like I always say, if you give me that follow, I will do the same in return. And that also goes for Instagram, and you can check me out at 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge. Also, if you're on Facebook, definitely check out the Sports Depot 365. And as far as I'm concerned, one of the better sports groups going on social media. But until next time, fine folks, my name is William Martin. I am signing off, and I'm saying thanks once again for checking out the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. Be well, everybody.